Join me every month for the inspiration to find your finish line. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Find Your Finish Line. I'm Mike Riley, and it's not only about finding your finish line at a race or an event, but in life. We got to find finish lines every day, every week, every month, don't we? And I hope all your training's going strong out there. We've had races on the weekends now. The season is in full swing. I know you've probably got it already planned out. So make sure you stay safe out there on the roads in your training so you can get to that race day. My guest today is a gentleman that has gone into the depths and come back out, And as you know, a lot of my podcast is not only professionals and the pros, but people that have overcome some pretty big hurdles in their life to get to where they are today. He's a man who's got a book coming out, as a matter of fact, and we'll talk about it. It's about surviving. He's an entrepreneur. He's an Army veteran, self-proclaimed change agent, Ironman athlete, inventor, husband, and father. Welcome, Scott Lackey, to Find Your Finish Line.
Thank you, Mike. It is great to be here, and it's good to see you.
Oh, thank you very much. And thanks for being on. Scott, I don't know if you know this, but my first question on Find Your Finish Line to my guest is always, what kind of workout did you get in today? Did you?
I did, actually. I had my 5 a.m. Strength workout this morning, and then after this podcast, I'll be sneaking off to the pool to get my laps in.
Good for you. Good for you. You know, I think people prepare for it. They go, I'm going to be on Riley's podcast. I better get a workout in. I can't say I didn't do anything. I love that. Well, Scott, let's go a little bit into your background for us. Your background. Yeah, as I mentioned, an Army veteran, an entrepreneur, inventor. Where would you like to start for people to know who Scott Lackey is and where you came from?
That's a great question. And I guess I would start really from where you started. And that is, my choices were a little bit different than most after I graduated from high school, in that I went in the Army first, and then I went to college second. And that was an epiphany for me. Fortunately, I figured out early in my life that I wasn't ready for college and I needed to do something differently. And I write about this actually in my book as one of the early change agents in my life that I recognized. And so not only, again, did I serve in the military in Europe and also in Desert Shield and Desert Storm, when I came back, went to college, my very first invention was actually discovered in the desert. And I tried to launch that invention during my high school years, not successfully, but there's an entire story about that as well. But I've spent a career not only being entrepreneurial in the sense of working with startups or having my own startups, some of which have been funded by private equity firms, but at the same time, I've lived the corporate life and worked at the higher echelons corporately in the U.S. or globally. I've done a lot of consulting as well, privately. Working with companies that were in challenging circumstances and participating and hopefully restoring vitality to those companies. So I've had a lot of these varied experiences, and I think that's been a huge gift to me in my life. And it certainly contributed to my Ironman training, because much of life, or writing a book for that matter, is really akin to Ironman training. It's about, the consistency and the discipline and the willingness to endure not only on race day, but the many, many months and many hours of training that lead up well before race day.
Yeah. As we know, it's all about that journey, and obviously, I've personally gone through that, through it too, and I know what you're talking about. Scott, why don't you go over? I've read the book. I was honored to be able to write your foreword, and I was touched by it. But what I was more impressed with was your failures, and some of your failures that I would say to myself, "Oh my gosh, I don't know if I can come back from that." Talk about a couple of those, if you would.
Sure. I'm not exactly sure which failure I should start with, because I list numerous of them in the book. But I would like to say to the audience something that will probably sound a little provocative, but it's a truth or a fact, if you will, that I believe in, which is failure really is what taught me success. And it was my success that taught me failure. And I know that's a little bit of an oxymoron, but all of my greatest gifts that I gained in my life came from failure. And, one of the things that I talk about in the book this is early in the book, I talk about my second invention that was actually funded by a private equity firm. And I invented a product that was actually patented. We call it the Childhood Health Passport. And that later led to one for adults and senior citizens and a financial health passport and one for pets and all these things. And it was this wonderful idea, again, that was patented. And ultimately, our business plan was funded for $3 million. And I know what it feels like to really win, if you will, a financial lottery, because that's what it felt like. It felt like I was writing the next made for TV, or made for movie life story about inventing something and taking it to market and it being wildly successful. And I just use that one quick example because when I tell people that 6 months later, after the firm invested in the company, they decided to fire me and take over the company. And I actually have a picture adjacent to me where just a few hours after that, I'm getting a picture made with me and my son. He's 2.5 years old, and my wife. And I look at that picture often. I'm reminded of that day. And I know it sounds so tragic about how does that actually happen and how do you come back from that? And it was absolute chaos. But something like that, I look back on it. And of course, I explore this in detail in the book. And this is early in the book, believe it or not. It was a tragic challenge. But some of the greatest gifts that I got in life came out of that. Now, would I want to repeat it? No. But when I look back on it, am I thankful for the gifts that I got out of it? 100%. And again, it doesn't matter if it's training or it's in business. That's something that I guess I'll say this philosophically. And again, I didn't learn this then, but many years later, I say this all the time, that the more I sacrifice of myself, the more of myself I find. And I find that to be true in training, and I find that to be true in really everything in life.
Oh, so true. Very, very, very well put. So Scott's book, everyone, when I first read the title and he sent it to me, a preview of it, I go, wait a minute. And it's a title that it grabs you right away because you have never seen anything like this or probably read anything like this. And it's called Wake Up to Die Again. Pretty darn, yeah, it's pretty darn provocative. I mean, Scott, when you first thought of this or titles and went down the road with that, it says everything that's in your book. I understand it now, but do you think people are going to go, wait a minute, what is this guy talking about? Wake up to die again? Breaking who you became so you can be who you're meant to be. Talk about that title.
You got it. I spent almost 6 months working with someone, an expert, if you will, and helping you come up with book titles. And we came up with everything you could imagine under the cover. And every time I thought I had the title, she would come back to me and say, I really need you to think about that a little bit more. And and it wasn't really until we got to talking about, I was growing a little professionally frustrated that we couldn't come up with a title after a lot of discussion and work. And she was sensing that. And we had a video conference. And I'll never forget, on that video conference, she said, let's start talking about some of the things that you frequently talk about, your training, your Ironman training, or some of these difficulties. And somehow we got onto a conversation about a morning run that I went on at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I got to talking about how I felt after that run. Felt like I just woke up to die again. You know what I mean? Because it was an intense workout on the track. And then that segued honestly into where a lot of people are, Mike, right now in their lives. And I know this is figuratively speaking, but there are so many people that I have met in my life, and we all know them, that they wake up every day just to die again. They're not living life. We've heard the stories. You've written an entire book about people that were in some dark places that decided to commit to an Ironman that forever changed their life. Not only did the training change their life, but crossing that finish line changed their life. So figuratively, right, or in part, there are millions of people that wake up every day that are not living life. They're not all in. They're not committed. They're not changing for the better. They don't believe in the slogan that we've lived by, many of us have lived by, that anything really is possible, right? And so uh, I guess I would say the culmination of those discussions with her, and I actually said that phrase in one of our conversations, just nonchalantly, after a workout, that I said, you know what? This really, in essence, on both kind of the negative and the positive, really solidifies many of the topics that I talk about in the book. On one hand, addressing an audience that wakes up every day only to die again because they're that miserable in life. But at the same time, there are other people, and I would equate this, to a professional triathlete or to other athletes, that we wake up to die again to get rid of the things that no longer serve us anymore. Or we wake up to die again, right, to improve on top of what was the person of yesterday. And that's a little bit what continuous improvement is about. Is that how can I wake up today and do the things, be disciplined enough to be a better version of myself today than I was yesterday or a week ago or 6 months ago? And that's when we start throwing in consistency. And there's so much that goes into that. But waking up to die again, I know it's a provocative title, it was meant to be. And I've learned from my beta readers, many of them, when they receive that title, their feedback has been really monumental in helping me solidify that I couldn't have come up with a better name for that book on both sides of the fence of people who are waking up and trying to figure out life all over again after a lightning strike in their life or something, or people on the other side of it that have decided, or have reached a point in their life where they are moving forward. They are building momentum. Again, whether it's an Ironman race or they're an athlete or they're a business person, a mom, a dad, a doctor, it doesn't matter. Something in their life they've done that they're bettering themselves. And I think that book applies to them as well, simply because they're going to see many of these stories mirrored in their lives. It'll be different circumstances, different challenges, but I think both sides of that story falls under the title of that book.
Yeah, it really does. And the other part that hit me was we all go through things in our lives that are a challenge, but it's not like, oh, my 30s were bad, my 40s were good, my 50s were bad, and my 60s were good. Something comes along and it's a challenge in your life. And whether it's a loss of a loved one, whatever it may be, you get through that and you keep moving forward. That's what I liked about this because you didn't specifically say you've got to do this or you've got to do this at this time of your life. It's just really about life, growing up. And I always say if we're above ground, we're always growing up. It's how we.
I'm glad you mentioned that, by the way, because it is there was two things that were critically important to me when I wrote the book. The first one, and I shared this with my coach who helped me through the process, was absolute authenticity. If I could not finish that book and look back at it and know that the reader would see absolute authenticity, and this, by the way, required me to be very vulnerable in many parts of the book,
Yeah, yeah,
so that
you
the,
were.
the readers could read this and mirror that. And I really feel strongly mission accomplished on that. And I think that's something that's going to be, I think, a big contribution to people who read this. Wow, what a breath of fresh air to read something so authentic and not hyped up and rah and do this and do that. And that's the second part, which is I'm not a huge fan of books that are about 7 steps to get everything in the world you want, because life's not an algorithm and it's not a formula. And all of our journeys are unique. Our paths cross each other. We travel some roads together, but all of our journeys, all of our paths are unique to us. And so that's why I'm not a big fan of the 7 steps. And you don't find that anywhere. You may find numerous places in the book where I'll say, consider this or evaluate that, or how do you feel about this, or what's your consideration? But I really tried to avoid telling the readers what to do. As a matter of fact, I think at the end of all the chapters, I've heard a lot of my beta readers say, wow, I need more. I need to know what happened here, from chapter to chapter.
Mm. Yeah, there were some details I had questions about too, and you and I talked about that. But I'm going to take it back one step too, because when you go through these things in your life and your business side and training and doing the races and all that good stuff, what was there a pivotal moment when you said, you know what? I got to write about this. I've, I want to put it in a book form. I want to write about it. Did you want to write about it because you just wanted to have it for your family's history, for the foundation of your children? Or did you want to write about it to say, you know what, I'd like everybody to read this? I mean, what was
Yeah,
the process?
I love that question more than you know, because that came up a lot in the last 2 years that I was putting this together, from people wanting to know the same question. Why did you write the book? Why now? And that's really the first question that I had to answer with myself. Why now? And the answer to that question was because the book's actually been ready for a long time, in my opinion. I wasn't. That's two different things. And what do I mean by I wasn't ready? In order to write a book that's authentic and share some of the vulnerabilities of what happens when lightning strikes in your life,
Mhm.
you've got to be ready to do that. And ready means you've got to be willing to go right back through the very things that made you wake up to die again. You got to relive that in the written form in a granular detail. And so the book, I think, has been ready for a while. I wasn't. And so then we get to talk about, well, what changed? Well, actually, what changed was my audience. Because for so long, I thought about, the audience that I wanted to write the book for. I never really could articulate who my target audience was. And you won't know this from reading the book until you get to the very end. And then a couple of sections where I talk about this. I explain it deep in the book, but you won't know it until you get there. But I actually wrote the book as a long form story to my wife and to my son and daughter, who lived through all of these unbelievable stories. And they only heard parts of them, or they only knew parts of them. They never knew everything. And of course, some of it is things that I talk about early in the book that happened early in my life that they heard bits and pieces of from, grandma and grandpa making fun of their dad. And that's really what the book is. It is a long form story that I could never tell to my family over 1,000 Thanksgiving dinners. But when I had to sit down, an opportunity to sit down over time and walk through all this in a logical format, it really wasn't until I got about halfway through the book that I finally figured out in great detail who my target audience was beyond my family. And when I got about halfway through the book, that's when I knew, because I knew the last chapter when I got about halfway through the book. So all I had to do was write to the last chapter to get there. So that's really the story behind it. It's a long form story for my family. And by the way, parts of my family unborn yet. I think this is because of the content and life lessons and hopefully a lot of wisdom. I hope this, pray about this too, that this continues to bring our family closer together, and extended family, and certainly family yet to be born in future generations.
Have your kids read the manuscript completely?
Not completely. Yeah.
Okay. It's interesting because in some of my writings, I wrote stuff in the first book, and my wife and kids said, I didn't know that. I don't know if you ever told me that." I go, "Well, maybe I did,"
Yep.
because things from your past. I'm thinking of I love your analogy, with the kids and the grandkids and the future generations, because, you had you chose the Army over college, which didn't make your parents very happy. You kinda discarded your medals one day and said, "This is not who I am." You were bold about that, in some ways, maybe reckless, uh, and they're gonna read about that. You think that type of history is something that's gonna help them shape their foundation in life?
I really do. I can't tell you. I really don't have the words to describe how close my family, how we are, the four of us are together. And again, they know some of these stories, but they only know them from a distance. And I walk through them in granular detail. And it has already, but my daughter, she was reading, she got through, I don't know, 4 or 5 chapters so far. And, they all love the book, absolutely love it. And my daughter said, I'm enjoying being inside dad's head. I understand so much here. Yeah. And of course, my son has recited some of the things that he's read. There have been things that have happened in his life. He's in flight school now, and there have been his own challenges. And he has recited some of the if I may, um,
Sure.
call it wisdom, Dad's wisdom in the book that he has recited in some of these challenges. And it's honestly, it's just made my heart explode. And, uh, and I love my wife more than myself, and it will always be that way. And to get her feedback has been monumental, to the point to where she's made it. And again, at the end of the day, I say this, and again, I'm not giving anything away, but I say this deep into the book. If this book brings my family closer and helps our family and maybe even generations to come, it's a victory for me. It's a victory.
Speaking, I'm sorry, go ahead, Scott.
No, I was just, that's my primary goal, right? And of course, secondarily, if there's one person or more that gains some personal benefit out of this, where it changes their life, that's going to be a huge victory. And I found those people, believe it or not, and I was shocked by this, well, because I was early in the process. But during the beta reader process, I had one gentleman get about 5 chapters into the book, and he texted me, and he said, Scott, I don't know if I'm going to be able to help you. And I shot a text back real quick. I was like, hey, what's going on? Are you okay? And he said, yeah. He said, you asked me to be a beta reader, and you don't know, but I'm going through some challenges in my life, and I'm 5 chapters in, and I've laughed and cried, and I think you're going to help me more than I'm going to help you. And so that was incredible feedback, and again, amongst other, and so it's been a very insightful process with many people like yourself, reading the book and giving me some very candid feedback. And so I look forward to the launch day to see what the rest of the readers have to say.
We're speaking with Scott Lackey on Find Your Finish Line. Scott, an age group athlete, entrepreneur, inventor, Ironman athlete, dad. Scott, in life, especially on the guy side, the men, we have a tendency to outrun or try to outrun some things that happen in our life. Let's just keep moving on and not think about it. And really, the generation like our parents and grandparents, that's what they were all about. Did you find you were outrunning things for such a long period of time that you finally said, I've got to confront this. This is breaking me up.
For sure, more than once in my life. And again, speaking to men, and not at the exclusion of women, we all have the same challenges, but speaking directly to men, I think we do a great job of running. And I don't know if it's just a part of us inherently, but we certainly, my military background, it was ingrained that you move forward. That's the only direction you have, is to move forward. And so yes, more than once in my life, events occurred where I had to make a choice, and that choice was to keep running or keep moving forward, or I had to turn around and face what was, I'm going to say, chasing me, if you will. And sometimes, in my opinion, what's chasing us is the very thing that we need to turn around and address. And so I don't know, there's so much of, I guess, life in the world that tells us that you can outrun your problems. But no, it's eventually going to catch up.
Yeah,
It always
or lie to yourself. I love one of your reflection points in chapters, illusions and truth. I love this. What lie have you been defending so long that it started to feel like the truth? And sit with that question before you try to justify it. And I think that's a tendency that we have where, well, you know what? That's what everybody believes. That's what I'm going to keep telling people until all of a sudden that lie starts breaking you down. When you were writing the book, and did you go and write like, okay, here's chapter 1, here's chapter 2, or did you jump around and say, you know what, this is where this would fit better, this would fit better. There's a lot of authors out there and people that want to write things. And is it an A to Z process with you on writing chapter 1 all the way through the final chapter?
Great question. For me, it was linear. Chapter 1 led to chapter 2, led to chapter 3.
No?
But it wasn't because, how would I say this? It wasn't because it came to me that way. I actually have written before, and I love writing short stories. As a matter of fact, I'm a columnist in our local newspaper, and articles are published every Saturday. And I love addressing many different topics in that weekly column. So I have a backlog, if you will, of stories, some of them unrelated to, the book. There's a lot of material that didn't make it in the book. And so because I like to write and because I like to journal, and of course, because I like to tell stories as well, what I was able to do was really on a huge dry board, take these stories based off of a table of contents and weave the stories, if you will, into a linear format, if that makes sense. So it wasn't that I sat down and said, oh, I know exactly what I'm going to write about in chapter one. I started out with a table of contents. And what I ended up doing was rearrange the table of contents as I was writing. And it wasn't until I really struggled with this. It wasn't until I got halfway through. Matter of fact, I didn't tell you this. I had to stop for 6 months.
6 months? You stopped writing for 6 months?
I stopped writing for 6 months. I mean, it was 5.5, but call it 6 months. I
That's
stopped.
still a long. I stopped for like 3 days. I'm beating myself up. 6 months would be tough.
I was beating myself up. And again, talking about running from stuff, it was in my head every day. And what I threw myself into was training, right? More and more and more training. That's what I threw myself into. And of course, I think a lot of people in the audience feel this way, is that some of my greatest ideas or thoughts came from the long run or the long bike or the swim or recovery days. But things were I thought would be linear, if you will, from the table of contents. But the table of contents actually, what it did is it pointed me in the right direction. And so as I was writing, I had to rearrange the table of contents. When I got halfway done, like I said, I had to stop. And I came back to it. And when I came back to it and started writing, that's when I realized I know exactly how this book ends. And then, believe it or not, the second half of the book became easy for me. I finished it very quickly. But the first half of the book was almost a year of writing, to be honest with you. It was very difficult.
So when's it exactly due out? Give us the schedule with all that.
Great question. So anywhere right now between April the 30th and May the 15th. I don't have an exact day yet. I should have in the next couple of weeks, but between April the 30th and May the 15th is where we're looking at for our launch day.
Now, did you go through a publisher or self-publish?
Self-publish.
Okay. Okay. So you're going to put it out there and have it on Amazon and all the outlets to sell it?
100%.
Do you have a goal on sales to talk about the business side of it, Mr. Business Person, Uh, do you have a goal in your eye? If I sell 200 books, I think I'd be pretty mad at myself. If I sell 2,000, will I be happy? 20,000. Do you have any type of goal?
Yeah. Again, having read the book, you're not going to be surprised by this answer. I've already actually met my goal only because of my goal with my family, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a secondary goal, right? Certainly. And that secondary goal directly and meaningfully impacts other people. I unexpectedly achieved that on more than one occasion with my beta readers. The beta readers taught me about, I think, reasonably what to expect when the book publishes. And so that would be a third goal, if you will. And the third goal would be, I'd love to, at minimum, recover the investments that I've made, in the book launches. But, I don't have these sugar plum dreams that, of selling millions of books, but if this book became a breakout, that would be something amazing, and that would be a gift. And I'm most interested with each book that's sold. I'm really anxious to find out how this helps other men and women and what I can learn from them and their stories. And that's more than anything what I'm looking forward to.
You'll hear back. There's no doubt about that. I can guarantee that'll happen. Where was my question going? Oh, so when you putting the book together and you talk about your beta readers a lot, and so I have a couple of questions about that. How many beta readers do you have, or did you have, and how do I put this, segment them into people from different walks of life or different ages or things like that? You didn't have all 35-year-olds read the book, or so how'd you separate that and choose beta readers?
Yeah, what a great question. Again, it was not a formal process, I'll tell you that, other than my own requirement to have a diversity of people from age groups. So I had young men and women that were readers. When I say young, meaning as young as their mid-20s, all the way up to, I think the oldest reader I have was probably in his late 60s, early 70s.
Mm.
I had people that are of great spiritual faith read it, pastors read it, presidents of universities read it. You know, in every spectrum you can, a front lady at the club that I work out with, or the gym I go to, at the front desk, I asked her and she was more than happy to do it. So I have this just unbelievable spectrum of people that I randomly selected. Some people I haven't seen for 10 years. My neighbor down the street that is a retired B-52 colonel from the Air Force. Really, just this spectrum of people. And every single one of them taught me something different because they were all from different walks of life, all from different age groups, all for different challenges. I had one guy that was a beta reader that I hadn't seen in a long time that read it. And we had a video conference like this for him to give me his feedback. And he's opened up by saying, whatever you do, and he must have said that to me 5 times. Whatever you do, Scott, listen to me. Whatever you do. I said, okay, please tell me. Do not change chapter 24, the last chapter.
Mm.
And, but again, there were other people that had different feedback. That I had one lady that she said, Scott, I'm 4 chapters into this and this just isn't for me. I said, that's okay. I said, well, what about the book's not for you? Maybe you can teach me something. She goes, it's the questions. I just don't want to answer the questions. I said, well, you don't have to answer the questions. I just wanted you to read the book and give me feedback. She's, oh, okay, I'll do that. A couple of weeks go by. I see her again. I was almost afraid to ask her if she was reading again.
No kidding.
And I didn't have to because she said to me, she goes, I want you to know, she goes, I'm halfway through now and this book is for me.
Wow.
So again, I'm just telling you, there's been a spectrum of people that have read it and they've come at it from different angles. And I guess I would leave everybody with this, is that because of the topics that I talk about, if I could say this, the book will meet you where you are in life. Whether you're, I'm going to say, experiencing great success and everything is great, or you're in a crisis right now. Lightning has struck and you don't know whether to turn left or right. I promise you the book will meet you exactly where you are. And it's going to be different for everybody. That's my opinion.
Very well put. The book will meet you where you are. That's fantastic. Some books, because I talk to authors that go back and forth about asking questions at the end of the chapter, and they're just really probing questions that you want the reader to ask themselves. It's not like it's a test or you write anything down, but it does make some people uneasy. Did you ever vacillate about that, going back and forth about whether I should ask some hard questions after a chapter or just not have it at all? Did you go back and forth about that?
I spent really an enormous amount of time on the questions, and I wanted to be balanced, if I may, in asking the questions. And I wanted them to be, I wanted them to have depth. I just, there's so many conversations in life that we encounter with people that just stay on the surface. Right. And I just recently actually published an article where, speaking of this topic, of these questions, is that the article talked about questions are like buoys. They always float on the surface. All right. And the answer to those questions can be as deep as the ocean sometimes. But so many of us are got 1 foot on the bank or 1 foot in the sand and 1 foot in the water, right? We get asked that question. The safe answer of the shore is always there. And so this was something I thought about and I processed when I asked these questions, is that I wanted to ask them in such a way that, you're not going to get anything out of if you stand on the beach talking to the buoy, the question. You're going to have to swim out to the deep water. And if you're willing to swim out to the deep water, that's where all the answers lie, right? They're in the deep water inside us. And there's a lot of retrospection that takes place in those questions. So, Yes, I spent a lot of time on those questions, and that's been some of the feedback I've gotten from the beta readers is that how much they love the questions because none of the questions are condemning whatsoever. It's not about you did this, you did that. This is the solution, right? They're more challenging to you to answer for yourself, not for me, but answer for yourself some things that maybe you haven't answered for a long time that need to finally be answered in order to get to the other side of yourself.
It's amazing to me that, not an amazing thing, but what it fills me with joy is listening to someone like yourself that realizes, the measure of yourself really isn't about accolades and awards and wins or losses. It 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 it's about doing something that's very hard for a lot of us to do, and that's face the truth, which you did, and you put it eloquently in the words you put in your book. So, I applaud you for that, and
Thank
again, the book will be out from now by mid-May, it'll be out.
At the latest.
Wake Up to Die Again. I'm telling you, dude, that is one hell of a title. I just first time I saw it, I go, "What is this guy writing about?" You know? So it was good. If you could give one piece of advice to our listeners out there about what the book hopefully will bring them, what would that be?
I'm glad you asked that question too. I guess what I'd like to say to the audience is I think the world and our surroundings try to teach us and convince us that if we take one more trip, if we get one more possession, if we can go a little bit further, just around the curve, just over the hill, that stuff that we're chasing, that hole that we all feel inside that we're missing something, that we're maybe not where we're supposed to be. It's just over the hill. I promise you, this is just for me and the way I live my life now and what I talk about in the book is that there is no distance you have to travel. There's no possession you have to gain. There's no vacation you have to take. There's no race you have to win to find what you're missing. It's exactly where you're standing and it's inside you. That's where it's at. The very thing that you're missing. I'm not saying vacations are bad, races are bad. Those are all wonderful things, but you will not find what you're looking for at the end of that. What you're looking for, what you're missing is inside you. And I really would be honored if you would read the book when it's out and challenge yourself because here's the other side of it. There is another side to where we are. There is another side. And when we get that right, when possessions don't control us, when medals don't define us, when none of that happens, and you're on the other side of that, you're going to have a better relationship with yourself and your family and your colleagues, and you're going to impact people. You're going to impact this world, your neighborhood, your communities, right? People are always going to remember how you made them feel. They're never going to remember the car you drove down the road. And so that's a message that I would share to everyone is that if we want to make the world better, it starts with us, not a possession, not a trip. And again, I talk about that in the book, and I appreciate the opportunity that you've given me to share that.
Well, Scott Lackey, I wish you nothing but great success with the book, with all the endeavors with it. And I know, the road out there of book signings and everything, I hope it comes your way heavy duty. So thank you very much for being on Find Your Finish Line and the best of luck.
Well, thank you, Mike, for who you are and inviting me and letting me do this. It's greatly appreciated. It's good to see you.
You got it. Everybody, guess what? You're the cause of your own experience. Keep those experiences positive every day, and you'll find your finish lines. Stay safe out there, and always my warmest aloha. Take care.